Hello Internet, and in this video I'm going to be painting a Skink Starpriest. So in today's video I'm going to be painting a Skink Starpriest, but please bear in mind that the way that I'm doing this can be applied to basically any skink model. It's not really relevant that he's a Starpriest, he just gets a funky chair. Now I'm not going to hang about, let's just get straight to the painting. So when it came to painting this skink model, I wanted it to be the classic blue colour. However, I decided I was going to base coat the entire model using pink horror. Now the reason I do this is I prefer to start at the darkest colour I'm going to have on the model and then work my way up to the lightest points. And I thought it'd be quite fun to have pink as the shadow colours for this nice blue model. Now applying the blue, which in this case was Lawthorn blue, was done using an airbrush. However, I suggest you don't actually do this. After painting this model, I decided I was going to go and update one of my previous models, which I believe is called the Troglodon, and it has a skink on the back, and I wanted to update it to be more in line with the colour that this guy turns out. And I didn't want to use the airbrush because it meant masking loads a bit of the pre-existing model. So instead, I base coated it by brush and then dry brushed on the blue. And I personally think the dry brush actually came out nicer than the airbrush. That could be because I suck with an airbrush, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is if you don't own an airbrush, this method is completely achievable by dry brush, so bear that in mind. When it came to painting the feathers, I decided to do a few coats of white on the area just to get a nice foundation for what colours I wanted to be later on, which is yellow. And yellow is a notoriously difficult colour to paint, so you want the lightest foundation to be painting on top of, hence the white. Once I was happy with the coverage of the white, I moved on to using Uriel yellow, which is a very vibrant yellow. And I mixed it with some Lamium medium, it doesn't really matter, you could use water if you wanted, just to thin it down a little bit and have it behave more like a wash over the feathers because they are so detailed. I didn't want to lose any of that, so that when it came to highlighting later, it'd be a bit easier to pick out the individual parts of the feather and whatnot. In order to shade the feathers a little bit, I decided to add some Trial Slayer orange to the base of the feather, where it would start to be going underneath one that is on top of it, so that it creates a kind of shadow. I then washed all the feathers using Caribou Crimson and just let that dry for a bit. Now when it came to the scales on this guy, I decided I didn't want them to be the same type of blue as the skin, I wanted to be slightly different. And with that in mind, I mixed the contrast paints, ultramarine blue and Achillean green. I then used this mix all over the scaled areas and on skinks that is normally on their back and maybe their legs as well. When it came to painting all the metals on this model, I could have quite easily gone for a really strong gold, but instead I wanted to work with a more dulled colour that I could then work up in the highlights. So to do that, I mixed gunmetal silver. You can basically use any silver you want and any gold you want for this, but I mixed gunmetal silver with Retributor armour to create a much duller version of gold. I then base coated all of the metal bits using this colour. I interrupt this video to tell you that I am relaunching my Patreon. This time around I'm keeping it nice and simple. For just £2 a month you'll get complete access to everything I post over there. And that is mainly going to be behind the scenes stuff. There are projects I'm working on at the moment that I'm not sharing on YouTube and I haven't posted on Instagram yet, and you will get to see that kind of thing. Plus you'd also get to see the videos I'm working on before they get uploaded. It also provides a great place for people that love the hobby and love illustration and everything else that I do. It's a great place for us to just chat and talk with one another and discuss stuff we all love. So if that sounds like something you'd like to be a part of, as I said, it's just £2 a month. There'll be a link in the description down below. Please consider joining. But for now, back to the video. Now fairly often among Seraphon models there will be gems laid into some of the necklaces and staffs that these warriors carry. And as I'm trying to keep this process fairly quick and simple, I decided what I was going to do was just pick out the little triangles and squares using a couple contrast paints just to add a tint rather than completely colouring it. So for this I primarily used Blood Angels Red and Ultramarines Blue, and I would just pick out some of the triangles and stuff whether that be on a necklace, on a hat, or whatever. It adds just that little bit of colour whilst being transparent enough that you still get the hint of metallics underneath. Now it's time for me to drive those metals back up, and to do that I use Retributor armour by itself, this time not mixed with silver, and I could use that to highlight the areas that I had used the mixed paint for earlier. As it makes up 50% of the paint I used earlier, it's a really natural highlight colour to be using, and it works really well. As for the method, it is the same as usual, just applying it with a brush to the most upwards facing areas. For highlighting the skin on the hands, tail, face, I mixed Fenrisian Grey with Vallejo White. Now Fenrisian Grey is a pretty blue grey, so it's going to work pretty well as a highlight colour for blue skin. And then when I get to the most extreme places where I want to draw in the most attention, for example the face and hands, I'm adding a little bit of white to the Fenrisian Grey. Now jumping back to those feathers that I was painting earlier, they should be fully dry by this point. I was using some ice yellow, and this was just to highlight some individual strands on the feather. I want to do one down the middle, and then some of the little bits that come out the side. For the glowing energy in the skink staff, I decided to base coat it white. It took a few base coats to do this to get a nice even coverage, but once it was dry, I went over with the contrast paint, Striking Scorpion Green. This was my choice for the colour of the energy being used by the Seraphon in my army. This is something I'll have to try and remember going forward in order to create a cohesive colour scheme throughout the entire army. I also used this exact method on the skink's eyes. I thought it looked pretty cool if he is using magic, like on his staff, his eyes turn the same colour as the energy being used. For the flap of skin on the crest on its head, I simply decided to use some Magos purple. Keep it really simple and wash it with the contrast paint. Because hopefully the darker areas will settle at the bottom, therefore making it look just fine. Now this was a nice quick and easy method of painting this model. And I also think once you get rid of the cape and the feathers and stuff, it'll be quite easy to replicate this method onto your standard skinks. I hope you enjoyed this model as much as I did, and if you did, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up and leave some comments down below. And if you want to keep seeing videos like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. It's free and it makes sure that my videos end up in your subscription feed. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.